Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Inlaks Fine Arts Awards presentation. We have come together today to present the Inlaks Fine Arts Awards for the year 2014 to 5 young artists, all fresh graduates from Indian art colleges, who we will support through the year. In addition to their grant, their support includes a 1-month residency within the country. After a rigorous selection process, these artists were chosen by an eminent jury comprising Manisha Parekh, Jaideep Mehrotra, Tasneem Mehta, Shilpa Gupta, and Mortimer Chatterjee. The program this evening will begin with the keynote address by Peter Fishley. This will be followed by a panel discussion between Abhay Sardesai and artists Hannah Herzig, Kilunji Kiahenda, and Thomas Saraceno. The discussion will be followed by an address by the chairman of the Inlaks Shivdasani Foundation, Mr. Azad Shivdasani. And finally, we will have the presentation of the awards. May I request you to switch off your cell phones, please, in case you have them on? Yeah. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Peter Fishley to you. He is part of the artist duo Peter Fishley and David Weiss, often shortened to just Fishley Weiss. Considered one of the world's top contemporary artists, their work has been executed in a variety of media, including sculpture, film, and photography. The duo is perhaps best known for the 1987 film, The Way Things Go. Fishley and Weiss won the Golden Lion Prize at the 2003 Venice Biennale. David Weiss passed away in 2012 at the age of 65. The title of the talk today is, Should I Fly with a Balloon to India? The Rule of Questions in the Work of Fishley and Weiss. I now invite Peter Fishley to address us.
Yeah, thank you for these nice words, and thank you for inviting me and my wife Madleina to India. We are having really a wonderful time here, enjoying being tourists. And so when you asked me if I would like to do the keynotes here, first, I never heard that word before. What is a keynote? I know what is a key, I know what is a note. So I had to come up with something. And when I was younger, I came to these places to get a prize. And so it shows by getting older, I have to come here for the talk. So that's my advice for the young artists. So you should look to not get too fast into that. So, as you said, when you asked me what would be my speech and what would be the title of my speech, I asked myself a question, what that could be, and so on. And so this was bringing up the idea, why don't talk about questions? And since questions were always very important in our work, and the only question that I had to come up like spontaneously when I looked at the book was this question, should I fly with a balloon to India? And as I learned from Boris Groys, the art philosopher, critic, he describes 2 types of questions. One question is the question that would say, it's a question, how long is the distance from Delhi to Mumbai? And that's a question that we can give a clear answer on it. Another question would be the type, why the world is not a cubus? And a question why the world is not a cubus is not making you thinking on the question itself, but it makes you thinking on the person who is asking a question like that. So that shows a little bit the range in which we are thinking in terms of questions. So, to start the talk, I was learned that in American culture, you should start the talk with a joke. In Japanese culture, you should start a talk with apologizing. So I apologize that I'm not making a joke. So I will talk shortly about the idea of asking questions and the problem we have about opinions. So, some questions about opinions that are some of them are in our book. The first question about opinions would be, can we go around the world without having an opinion at all? The second would be, do opinions come by themselves, just being passive and waiting that the opinion comes up? The third would be, are there more opinions than people? We know that everybody is filled with opinions. So this leads us to the thesis that there are on the planet more opinions than people. But what we do with these opinions? One other question was, is my absence of opinions the express of a free will? So to refuse to have an opinion is also an interesting topic. But these are all opinions about opinions and so on. But still we need some arguments for judging the things around us. In this special case, which of all these young artists will get a stipendium? The problem with going around the world and having an opinion about everything is that we found us in a self-made jail made out of our opinions. And who wants that? Opinions, what I wrote down here. Opinions make life or art less complex. A decision is made about good or bad, right or wrong, ugly or bad. But artworks, if they are fresh and surprising, always have the power to confuse us about changing the rules of right and wrong, and so on. There is a silly and smart game, and this is exactly why I like it. This helps us to enlarge our argument a little bit more than just I like it or I like it not. There are four categories. The first category is I love to hate it. Second would be I hate to love it. Third is I hate to hate it. And the fourth would be I love to love it. Let me give some examples for this. The first, in my case, because these are all very subjective arguments, that I love to love it would be for me the surrealists. I love to hate the surrealists. Why? I think it's regression, it's trivial, it's just illustrating the subconsciousness. Or I could say, I love to hate Marcel Duchamp because everybody likes it. So the next category, I hate to love, would be for me, as a contradiction to what I said before, it would be Salvador Dali. I hate that I love Salvador Dali because it's so obvious and but still there is something in it that I like. So the third one, I hate to hate it, would be for me the paintings of, Paul Klee, not his drawings. It makes me feel really guilty in a way that I don't like this really wonderful artist, but I can't help myself. And the last, I love to love it, would be minimal art. Barnett Newman, Carl Andre, Flavin, Ed Reinhardt, and Robert Ryman. These are my heroes, even if you don't see it in my work. It gives me a great feeling that I love these artists, which are so sublime. To find an artist or an artwork that covers all these four arguments in one would be the best, because it would lead us in the beautiful, promiseful, obscure, or fear-making land of the uncertain. The land of great art, a land as wonderful like India. Thank you.
Thank you for that thought-provoking address. It was wonderful. We move on to our panel discussion now. Our discussant for the evening is Abhay Sardesai, who needs no introduction to the Mumbai audience. He has been the editor of Art India, perhaps the premier art magazine of India since November 2002. He is a writer in English and a translator from Marathi, Konkani, and Gujarati. An associate of the research collective Pukar, he was the director of the Writing Across the City project. Now on to our three artists. Born in Luanda, Angola, Kiluanji Kiahenda grew up in a household of photography enthusiasts and spent considerable time with photographer John Liebenberg, and this helped the artist discover the power of images to reveal untold stories. His conceptual edge was sharpened by immersing himself in music and avant-garde theater. In his practice, Hender explores photography, video, performance art, installation, and object sculpture. Hannah Herzig's work at the Mobile Academy Berlin deals with the notion of knowledge and non-knowledge and how they are used and transferred in the act of communication in public spaces. Each project is first a live event and later becomes an installation and an archive. In recent years, she has been researching the zones between life and death with an ensemble of scientists and academics. Thomas Saraceno is known for his fantastic sculptures and installations that merge art, architecture, and science. Saraceno's work draws on his training as an architect, exploring materials, man-made and natural structures, and the potential for space. In 2012, Saraceno constructed the installation Cloud City for the roof of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. May I now invite the participants onto the stage, please? We'll have to get you some mics. Could we have some mics, please? Sorry? No, you all can all come up, and then we'll have, while your work shows, you can talk about it or whatever. Yeah, come.
All right. Thank you, Amita, for inviting me and assembling this wonderful panel. Promises to be an exciting give and take. We hope to make it a little informal, and at the end of it, we also expect some of you at least to ask questions and sort of liven it up. What we thought we could do is we could invite the artists to give us a presentation about their work, 10 minutes each, after which we shall open the floor and have a conversation. So may I please ask Kilonji to talk about his work and show some of his images.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thanks for this invitation, the Inlaks Foundation. It's a pleasure to be here, and also to give my compliments to the artists nominated for this prize. I can believe they're really proud for it. I am Kilwanshki Ahend. I was born in Angola. And the fact that I'm almost the same age of my country, it was something that really motivated me as an artist, because during my childhood, when I was born, the generation of my father, they were like busy designing the flag for the country, composing the anthem for the country, and it all like at the same time there was that time of revolution, a time that we didn't have like kind of museums of art. There was no kind of private galleries or biennales or triennales. And the art we had was in the street. The art at that time was kind of this tool for the revolution, was an exclusive tool for the revolution. But at that time in Angola, there was a civil war too. And the country came like from a period of slavery, then colonization, and then a civil war, but with his roots on the Cold War. And for sure that for us was like, there was not time to think about history, because war really demands a big effort, a physical effort in human beings. And I believe that me, with my lazy nature, I will never do a war, because you have to put your alarm for a clock and wake up and have to walk kilometers. And so I always see this as like all these diligences that went around that. So there was a kind of a gap, a historical gap. There was this whole period that was never discussed until the war had finished like 10 years ago. And suddenly, like very slowly, we start like to look back and start talking about this. And so I found that period kind of blank pages where I can allow myself to create my work. And so let's say it also gives me space to manipulate and to lie. And that's what the things I like to be an artist, is that I can lie without being called a liar. And so I went through some works that would kind of, after the war had finished, I'd start like traveling, and I went to the south of country, and I wanted to see how these ancestral people would like still living after that old conflict in 30 years of civil war, let's say. It's quite a lot, and another 14 years of the war against the colonization. So we're talking about like 5 generations. And so when I arrived to the place of these ancestral people in the south of Angola, what I discovered is the Chinese had arrived there before. So there's like, I found that market, and the landscape was almost kind of with all these elements and products that came from China. And there was this woman, I don't know if you can see her, it's like this ancestral ethnic group called Mumuila. It's like they're still living like they were living like 500 years ago, except now, because they're now like this kind of new products, new open market politics. And so after that, I start like doing some designs and say, well, how can I do a work that would refer to that hybridity that would was happened in that particular area. So I start doing some work like those printings on the Chinese bags. But the work that for me was important was that last one. After when I returned from that travel, I was in Luanda, and I had a dinner with some friends in a bar in the ghetto in Luanda, and then appears like a group of travestis, travesti, the strangers. Well, trenches. And for me, it was like, that was wonderful somehow, because it was an area of poor people, and they were really open to that. And it was like an opposite of what what is happening in Africa right now, the problem of homophobia and now what all is going on. And so I asked Poderosa, this is the person that is in the picture. Poderosa means almighty, but every friend calls her Poderosa because she has a catering enterprise and she lives with a group of trenches. And so I asked her if she would like for me to dress her as a traditional African woman. And she accepted, and then we went like 20 kilometers out of the town to do that portrait, but we chose this landscape like deep Africa. And this portrait was kind of a trap about all these stereotypes that is around Africa, but also to question that idea of what is the deep Africa, what is, and this kind of nostalgia of like we have to return to the roots. Which roots? Like everyone's driving Mercedes-Benz, everyone dressing Giorgio Armani. Which roots people want to go back? And so Poderosa brought her high heel shoes, and we did this portrait. And then I exhibited this piece in São Paulo. And in São Paulo appeared like a man called Bantu Tabacissa, that is an Angolan guy, but was living in São Paulo for 25 years. And he said, like, well, I'm a representative of African culture here in São Paulo, and I paint, I cook, I dance, and do music. He was like trying to protect his space. And after he disappeared, like 10 minutes from the gallery, and when I returned to Luanda 2 months after, I saw this news in the newspaper on the way to my studio that Bantu Tabacissa was doing an exhibition about the African women, the traditional African women. And when I looked at the newspaper and I saw I said, I know that man. And I looked behind him, there was this painting. And it was a copy of Poderosa. And so that's his painting. After a friend of mine sent me this picture, and so sometimes like, well, I get a bit irritated because of high heel shoes. Oh, that's detail. Oops. But that's something that I want to raise. The question I want to raise in that work I wanted to do. So Bantu Tabacissa, that artist, didn't even look if it was like a man or a woman. He was just obsessed of this idea that he has to look as an African. And then I go on with my research in these pictures. I just knew that I have only 2 minutes, and well, I don't have much time to show this project. But it's also connected to that historical heritage in Angola. So these are pictures done inside the museum where all the Portuguese monuments were taken after the independence. They were removed from the public square. And they are there in this museum, not like an exhibition piece, but like we don't know what to do with that part of history. Because those are figures that at the same time they had the glory of building an empire, but they were also, like many of them, dealing with trade of slaves or the colonial time. And for me it was very important when they took one of the most important queens in Africa, Rainha Ginga. They put that temporarily because they were rebuilding the square where her monument was, and they just put it in front of the first king of Portugal. And there was a kind of conflict in that area there, like the queen with her axe coming in a 4x4 from Russia, and the first king of Portugal, and this monument cut in 4 pieces. That is the founder of city of Luanda. Well, I had a discussion with some people there in Luanda, including the Minister of Culture, because she told me like, well, that she found my interpretation really strong about it, and what would be my idea of doing with those monuments, and what those Portuguese monuments. And I say, well, for me, they're kind of clandestine citizens, like their visa already expired, and maybe they could be deported to the place of origin. But no one, let's say, not everyone shared the same idea. And the minister didn't like that kind of interpretation, and so that I would ask, like, the question that I came to her is, so what she would think about them, and she said that I don't know what they represent. They really represent to our society. But so this kind of archival picture of that moment of colonization. So I decided then to do a performance in the plinths where those monuments were. This picture is from the beginning of the 80s, and there was one of the plinths that was in one of the Portuguese monuments. And during the 80s, because there was no time to think about history, the country was in war, they put a tank, a war tank, a Russian war tank, to just as a substitute. And so I asked, then I invited some friends to do a performance on those plinths. This is Didi Fernandez, is a friend that is like part of the organization about gay rights in Luanda. This is Shunas Fial, a poet that was accepted to go on the plinths. That was the plinth that was the monument of the first king of Portugal during the colonial time. And there is Miguel Prince, he's also a performer from Luanda that has an obsession with the musician Prince. And so I just asked some crazy friends to join and to invade those pedestals. Well, they kind of a monument of this city that is Luanda, which lives from that improvisation is like a way of living. Thank you.
Hannah?
So we just go chuckity, chuckity, chuck? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was thinking actually, how do you start a speech or a talk in German? And I think actually it has to be a statement. I don't really have a statement, but nevertheless I will come up with a line and say, okay, what the Mobile Academy is doing, we are thinking about the methods of conversation and can you still hear me when I do it like this? And the art of the assembly and the potentials of the dialogue. So it's mainly all about speech, language, conversation, communication. I was asked to present some of our projects, and so this is what I'm going to do. So in 2010, we started to work with the university in Berlin about a specific research project which was called Languages of Emotion. And what it actually is, that it's about plumbing the connection between emotions and the signaling practices, scientific competence from more than 20 disciplines gathered from the humanities and natural science. Basically what they stated is that in science, when you think about language, you don't think about emotions, and when you think about emotions, you don't think about language, and they wanted to change that. So what we did is we gathered all those scientists from 20 different disciplines, put them in this tent. And actually this image is not very good because you could see the silhouettes of these scientists very sharp. The public is sitting around it. The tent is slowly moving. And you have this highly complicated, overloaded scientific talks about shame and guilt, or about anxiety, about dementia, disgust, also fake feelings. And the public who is sitting around this tent has headphones and can tune in the different dialogues. So after a while, when you are listening to scientists, then you know that there is a problem and the problem is actually their language. And it's a double problem if they talk about language. So what we did then is we invited another group of people who are actually very professional in thinking about emotions. It's a queer group from Berlin, Los Angeles, and New York. And we made a film with them. Actually, they were talking about the same subjects, but in their artistic, theoretical surroundings. So what you had that evening when you came in there, you had the choice between two different types of dialogues about the same subject. It was maybe unclear in the first moment what is life and what isn't. Actually, the scientists were live, the artists weren't. And on top of this, there were a lot of other, let's say, translation processes. So there was someone who did an audio commentary, who was just watching what you see and was giving a constant audio commentary. Then there was a group of the students from this university, and they had a group somewhere and were constantly discussing what they were hearing. You had interpreters, which is called like speech to text interpreters, who were typing out the dialogues and you could read them, but also they were interwoven with the theory of the Israeli sociologist Eva Ilus, who has a very specific take on what emotions is and what language and emotions is. So, and there were some other things. I think I don't have another image of this. So when you enter this space, and that's actually what we always try to do, I think, is on one hand to blur the boundaries between disciplines and the hierarchies between levels of discourse. Then there is a whole notion about that intimacy and publicness is put into place to define again a meeting place like we know it from the antique agora or from the antique arena. And of course, there is the role of the spectator important for us. And the spectator or the audience is fragmented into his possible parts. You don't have a lot of possible parts right now. You are sitting in the dark and you have to listen to me. But in our performances, you have a part as a voyeur, as a witness, as a client, as an observer, as a guest. You can walk in as a cultural tourist. You can be a shopper or a participant or even an actor. And we try to find scenes and situations for as many as possible of these partial instincts and providing possibilities of watching and doing by offering the spectator to reassemble himself as a spectator that night. Another important part of our, this is the way of talking, important part. Another part is a definition of the assembly. So these events are not really interested in the viewer's contemplation, which you might do right now, actually. Instead, it animates collective desires of annexation, whether in consumption or as participation or in action. The event doesn't stare into the darkness of the auditorium to mirror itself in the yearning gaze of the viewers, which is who is there mirrored there, but rather plays in the light so that the members of the audience can observe each other, watching, listening, and acting, which is more the models of the watchers watching, the watchers watch. I'm very happy that I could pronounce this. Most of the time I'm stumbling over this. So if all goes well, the audience may observe collective desire of annexation, whether in consumption, participation, or in action. Another thing which we try to install is narration as form of knowledge transfer, but we can come to this later. And of course, in all the installations, the dialogue is the core of our setup and of our scenography you can see here. Okay, very fast. This is one of the, this turned out to be, strangely enough, one of our most successful installation. We have done it already 14 times. It's called The Black Market for Useful Knowledge and Non-Knowledge. And very briefly, it's like this. You come to a city, you do a research, let's say, for a site-specific topic. Okay, whatever that is. Then you look for 100 experts from different fields. That's really a cut-through society. So if, for example, in the city of Vienna, the topic was who will have been guilty, because guilt, for several reasons, is still a topic very much discussed in Vienna. Then you will have, of course, people from religious studies, but also maybe someone who lives of no money, or someone from the, I don't know what's called, depth department. So you will cut through society, no, really? Academics, theoreticians, but you also go to professions, and all of these people are then invited for that night. They sit at a table, and when you come in as a public, you can book them. You can book them for a one-on-one dialogue. And the public who hasn't booked an expert is sitting around, also having headphones, and can tune in into the different dialogues. So that established, and actually I also should say, to book an expert is really complicated. There's a check-in, and you don't know really how to do it. You have to bribe those people, so there's a lot of fuss going on. It's really a marketplace, you know, to understand that knowledge is really something which you try to buy on a market. But then when you come inside the hall, there is concentration. It's like a library with live spoken words. And it also is a sort of how I like to think about how a university should be, or, yeah. Okay, let me see how fast I can go. Okay, this we don't talk about. This was in Taiwan. This, we don't talk about it now. That's actually from David Shrigley, but he gave it to us for a really complicated moment. How much time do I have? Do I have 1 minute? Yes. Okay, I'll try. So here, okay, I have to cut it. The question here is about, let's say, about a new type of science, which we now call life science, which asks the question, to make it very blunt, when does a life begin and when does a life end? And all of this is now, since 10 years, more in question. I'm talking about Europe now, but also. So we had to stage this in a moment when there were actually a lot of questions in the public about this, in Germany. And we came up with the idea to bridge the scientific questions from medicine, biology, physics, caretaking, with the very colorful images of pop art, let's say, with the zombie culture. The zombie, you don't have zombies in India, I know this. Your people or your creatures in between look much more elegant than ours. But we have this really ugly masses marching between life and death. And we combined this in a congress, which was set up like a TV studio. This is the entrance. Yeah, there you see people. Then we had different sets, the cemetery, the hospital, the cinema, and the laboratory, so 4 places for the undead, actually. And there were happening the different talks. You see, it looks like this from above. People could walk through this, also tune themselves in via headphones. And that was actually an event over 4 days. and it gathered. That was, for me, it was the best thing maybe we have done, because to this event also all the nurses came and the doctors came. So it was not really an event anymore which was for art or culture. And yeah, and we raised this question of the, okay, this I just stop. I just stop here. Okay.
Okay, from exploring the crisis of identity in Pilonji's case, in a country that is newly independent and that is going through a series of bloodbaths, to exploring or mapping the richness of one's inner life in Hannah's work, we now jump on to Thomas Saraceno from Argentina, whose work seems to be sort of located at this very interesting cusp of amusement, art, science, play. On to you, Thomas.
Okay, no, thank you. No, yeah, exactly. No, now the good image. Yeah, okay. Beautiful. But no, thank you for being here. I was trying to look at. Anyway, now one of the questions that all the time people have been asking is, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Since I landed, it's all the time this kind of a bombardment of people asking you, where are you from? And that's basically something which all the time I confront myself, you know. And then I think so in the catalog of Rax Media is like, where is everybody? And you know, I mean, I go back to this kind of Fermi question, no? It's like which goes a little bit. I mean, the images you should be looking is a little bit what had happened, and imagine yourself at night, a little bit also what is, you know, how maybe the stars get reflected there. But a little bit, maybe, I don't know, to engage a little bit, you know, I was born in Argentina. Then when I was 1 year old, my family had to move to Italy. You know, it was a dictatorship period, and then my father was in jail 2 years. And here in foreign, then I went to Italy. And then Does it mean I went to Italy is also like kind of problematic. My family moved, right? I was 1 year old. And then from 1 to 11, I was in Italy. And then, you know, there is always this kind of, both countries, I think, are quite passionate about football or soccer. And then it's all the time this question you raise up on saying, hey, you know, it's like when it came the football World Cup, and it's like well, you know, and I was in Italy and say, well, but you are the Argentinian guy, right? And then when I moved to Argentina, I say, but you are the Tano de mierda, you know what I mean? You are the bullshit Italian. I mean, I would, you know, and then the people ask me both, you know, I'm here and there, like, you love football? I say, you know, it's like a very conflict, you know. And this means when people keep asking me, say, when I arrive to India, I say, where are you from? I say, the answer what I could say is like, well, I'm from the planet Earth. And people kind of disappointed. So the times like, you know, it's like you're disappointed. Yeah. You know, it's like a kind of, well, you know, stop it. You know, it's like from somewhere you might be. But I don't know. And then somehow conscious or unconscious, I think so I start to build a work upon maybe this work, which I never question myself. But there might be something there, right? And then, I don't know. I tried in one way or the other one more practical, less technological, or less, in some way, to be there. But then the other thing also, I think so was, I mean, I enjoy very much being here. And there was also like a beautiful lecture about Hito and I think so, yeah. And then it was all about engagement and commitment and all these questions, which I think so somehow touch some of the things we are talking. I forgot to put the start, because one thing I forgot is like I have 236 images to show today.
Relax.
And then she said, I will show you twice, each of them. Does it mean, anyway. Are we ready? We will go very quickly. No, but it is this kind of threshold of perception, right? It's like a movie is 24 seconds per image. And then they have been always, anyway. Let's show some works, because you had pointed out that we should look at some of these beautiful images. And right, are beautiful. Yeah, this is Bolivia. And this is kind of the flattest surface on Earth. And as I told you before, I mean, one thing also, when I look back at this thing is you know, these kind of images that somehow are there but are not there. And I tell you, one of the beautiful things is like you are walking down there and then all stars are, I mean, it's the middle of the night. And somehow this horizon can completely blur. you don't see anymore, the distinction. And most of the days, to be honest, are like this. It's like you don't see where you go. And then somehow it's also pretty amazing. All the stars get reflected with the kind of the same intensity of brightness, the one which are up and the one which are down. And then somehow when you step on in, all this kind of wrinkling water somehow kind of reverberate, this kind of cosmic weapon that we kind of embedded. And this one of the projects which I'm working is trying to go back up there. But I will try to go kind of a little bit quickly. I have 10 minutes. Yeah, and then somehow, I didn't want to do it so biography, but somehow the images came up like this. But yes, I study architecture somehow, and this is a little bit of history also of how it came through. And then, yeah, and then these beautiful cities, which somehow doesn't look like the cities where we live today. Yeah, these are kind of it's a very warm country, and they decided just to make just all houses under the ground because they get more cold. And see, this, I mean, one of the kind of the more influential book when I started to study architecture was like Architecture with an Architect, and actually the architecture which I was looking was kind of the places where architects were not needed, or the things that I admire more are this type of this also is all villages built up by this kind of rooftop, which now they said maybe being exchanged by these satellite dishes, but actually it's like the wind also blow in certain direction and then make this kind of natural air condition, right? By the way, I'm freezing. It's like one thing as they say one of the way of solving global warming is just like to take out your jacket. You know what I mean? It's like that will diminish all the problems but it's just only the way how you dress, right? It's not about talking something else. It's like there is not you know what I mean? I'm very simple.
Yeah.
But somehow there is this formality that everybody have to dress up in a certain coat, and this somehow we have to kind of cool it down. Anyway. But and then the other book is this, by Kees Bok that then have been taken by I forgot the Power of Time by the IMS, no, which is kind of this very quickly back and forth, kind of zoom in and zoom out from how many steps in the power of you can go through. And then this I will just go through because I think so. I thought like one thing also is like nice that you see something magic, but the other thing also I said like it's beautiful to.
What's that?
Yeah, this is a model. I thought it's beautiful, the award and being with let's say I consider myself young, but that was a model that I did like maybe 15 years ago when I was in the university, just finished, and then I was trying to propose this kind of let's say what we call a flying city or cloud city, right? Which somehow it could challenge a little bit also this kind of social, political, architectural way of living, which I was trying to challenge myself on a kind of a discourse. I mean, one thing, for example, when people travel around the world in a balloon, which somehow refer also by the conversation of Peter, who said like, I will come by a balloon to India. One of the biggest challenges is not so much the technology or the construction of the balloon, or let's say to forecast the weather, is to get the clearance to cross the airspace through the different political states of the city. This means the words, then they make around the world. This means it's still a kind of much more like let's say, a socio-political problem than a technological one. But nevertheless, I mean, there is a city which is kind of falling down. You can interrupt me anyway. And then it's so on and so forth. I start to build some of the things and some of the models.
Wait, come on.
Slowly.
No, there are 350. I have to
Show
go through.
it.
But somehow, I mean, I just stopped in some of these, and then that's like 10 years later through kind of this. But, when I was studying also at the architectural school, let's say, luckily also was Peter Cook and Thomas Barley, and somehow I get engaged in kind of another discipline. But, this maquette, which was made plexiglass, kind of folded, everybody say, bullshit, you will never be able to build it. And somehow, I'm happy also somehow to come up with these images, which somehow, like 10 or 15 years later, somehow became reality to a certain extent. And what I will say, again, maybe going back a little bit with this idea of engagement or commitment or also, you know, to try to generate kind of a scenario also which somehow it make us feel somehow, you know, engage on the responsibility also on, I mean, just to be very quickly, but look, maybe I show one of the images on Brazil.
Where was that?
This is in Italy. In
This is
Hungary,
Italy.
Italy. This is just very simple, but you know, I'm trying to generate a space which somehow is aware of each of us at the same time. This means if we will be in that space today, giving this talk, I will be moving and I will be feeling or sensing your movement very quickly. And this means there is a kind of a, you know, this kind of try to make more tangible this kind of sensibility to our relationship among people. Right? But very, very simple. But also it kind of became very problematic. And then go back to cosmology, let's say, of this kind of universal thing. Because when many people, you know, let me put it back in some of the images. Oh, I missed some of them. I will go back again. Let me put it up. There is one or two images. Anyway, when 2 or 3 people kind of join all in one place, it kind of generates kind of a social black hole, what I call it, because it's very difficult to go out because, you know, depend on, I mean, I then go back again to the idea of, you know, I was happy to be at MIT discussing this with Alan Guth, the man who invented the inflationary theory, you know, but it's very simply, it's also like what Einstein was telling, you know, space and time is bending depending of the weight of your body. Does it mean as big you are, you more will gonna spend your time? 2 minutes, okay. This is mean, but there is a very, very sensible, let me, you see, for example, these men want to go out, but for him it's very difficult to escape from that place. Because if until 2 or 3 other people are in the other space, he will not be able. This means, you know, space at the same time maybe do not exist, and only when you enter into it, it kind of open up and unfold, in pretty much in a kind of a relationship performance. Anyway, I go to some images, I got 2 minutes, and I want to, well, yeah. Yeah, well, I try to build it left and right with some of the things, and there are some ideas. This is, yeah, this was in Chile. You could see some of the images. Wow, this is maybe the balloon of Peter, who I could borrow. It's a solar balloon. You can build it with 200 euros, 1 weekend, 3 person. And there have been built only 7 in the world. Does it mean fly only with solar energy is something which is pretty unknown still on this world. There are only 7 so far have been built in the world who can carry a balloon, a man up in the air, no? Right? This is only like the power of the sun. Let's put it away. This is a kind of more social project which go back. Then we build up something which is called Museo Solar. It's kind of a community project where we kind of collect plastic bag and put a little bit more in a kind of problematic way of how plastic bags have been used and the extension of them. And then again, you place them all together, the sun come up from the horizon and then kind of fly up into the air. And then it's a museum, which is a collection of different plastic bags, it kind of keep collecting. Well, then we try to because the Federal Aeronautic Aviation somehow do not let you fly this balloon until until you don't get a mechanism somehow to bring it down. Anyway, I go through the thing, then, you know, Buckminster Fuller also have influenced so much, and I got 1 minute left.
No,
well, no, but it's the lecture, it is the piece of the, which is now at in Indira Gandhi Center of the Art, which somehow it weave again. But maybe I just show this because it's kind of this cosmic spider web, which somehow, you know, the Max Planck Institute all the time, when they talk about the origin of the universe, they refer to kind of the analogy they find is kind of a 3-dimensional spider web. That's just how the universe have formed.
But talk about this just for a minute, because
Yeah.
everyone who goes to the exhibition says
okay.
this is the best work. So just talk about it.
No, what I like it is like I did not do it. No, it's like it is beautiful.
Yeah.
Sit off what no, it's the spider web. The spider who made it. This means it's not. You know, it's, again, you know, this kind of maybe give the space to or the time and the space to somebody to do something,
Yes.
right? Which I hope so we could do
But the
it.
spiders are actually there in that space, right?
Yes.
They do it
Yeah.
live.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, and they keep with me. But maybe, no, if time is gone, I want to respect
Time is not
the
gone.
thing. But
take your
just
time.
like
Come
go,
on.
go.
No, we don't really
And then
have
go
too
on,
much
and
time.
then. Yeah, well, it's a pretty, this goes very much into kind of more scientific, but also madness. You know, have long nightmares of counting all the grains of sand in the world, And then it came up like 6 scientific papers, so, because it's the first time we scan a 3-dimensional spider web, which then we are trying to close the gap about this analogy of the universe, how it forms, and how the spider webs weave a web. And then have not been, and now we are working with NASA also to send spider to the International Space Station and try to see how they will be living in the weightless space. This is one of the last proposals to get more ready on the thing, and this is some of the web which are there. And then, well, this is Düsseldorf. One of the last installation is still on. If you want to go up there and kind of relate it with this kind of synchronicity of sharing some space. Thank you.
Hey!
You know, sort of to take off from where Mr. Fishley left us, he talked about the apology and the jibe, and now, of course, the applause. I think it's really quite unfair to actually expect 3 interesting artists to run through their work in a matter of 10 minutes. But thank you so much for actually, pulling it off. The first thing that actually strikes me, when I look at your work, the 3 of you, and it's going to be really quite tough, sort of, boring an arrow through the practices, which are so completely distinct and disparate, is what one might call the poetics and politics of space. I think that's something that actually touches, and you touch upon in a very sort of multi-prismatic way. What do I mean by that? Space as a possibility, space as a ground, as something inside us, around us, above us, below us, something that we try to frame through our art, something that frames us even as we try to frame it. The capacity that all of you as artists have to, in fact, transform it. Also, the proposition that gives the artwork a certain kind of meaning, and the proposition that the artwork takes away from. Thomas's spider work, for example, which is a take on site specificity, also live art and performance art, the undead in Hannah's case, for instance, where communication vectors create an area of meaning and non-meaning. The Kilonji's photographs, for instance, which are constantly trying to reconstruct and reimagine the geopolitical arena of Angola as a very, very dynamic space. So I'm just curious about how you actually address and find yourself and lose yourself in the idea of space itself.
Oh, well, it's quite a difficult question for me. Let's see how I position myself. I'm like I've always been growing up in a urban context. And for me, like the space which I live and explore and what I could learn from it would be, let's say, I've always learned how to deal with rules of, since I was a kid, of the streets, and then during my time when I was a student, and so it somehow, all the politics that were around through the country and all the tension that we were living somehow created those limits, and somehow I would understand much of what I do as an artist, of those things I could see in the street, because there's a kind of a different way of using the public space, for example. I'm talking about, and this for me, it's this, as I said at the end, this kind of improvisation, this kind of, well, people start adapting to a place where it, from beginning, doesn't belong to them, and they, like in my city, in Luanda, where all that city was built, not thinking about not built for the Angolans, it was built for the Portuguese, for the white Angolans.
Right.
And today people start to, not today, since the independence, people start to invade those spaces and to transform it. And it happens like in the very kind of instinctive way, like it's not something planned. And it could be like the webs of Thomas, the way they happening. You never can plan out a web
really.
of a spider will grow, and that's how I learned how to deal with space. How this kind of nothing is predictable, and that makes the thing for me more exciting.
Sure.
Well,
what about Hannah?
I mean, if I would have to think about this situation here and how to make out of this setting a space, then I would say, okay, first we need, of course, lights. Can we have some lights in the public? And then I would say, imagine that the person who's sitting beside you is acting. So turn your head around to the right or to the left and look at this profile, how it's obviously looking at me, and hope that maybe the person turns around. So then you face each other. That would be, for me, if it comes to create a space right here, the first possibility, that all of you are looking at each other. And then when you do this, and of course, because you're coming from the art, you don't do this because you worship imagination. If you would come from theater, then you would say, oh, great, it's going to be a workshop now, I will join. But so as you favor imagination, you are still staring at me, so the space won't happen. If in case you would do this, that you would turn around and watch face to face your neighbor, then I would say, now there are missing words. And how you start a conversation, you have to think this one sentence, only when I understood, no, only when I saw how you understood me, I knew what I have said. Only when I saw or heard how you have understood me, I knew what I have said. That's the idea of how a reciprocal translation process between listener and talker, between client and counselor, establish the space I'm talking about. The space for me is only the possibility which can come up in a conversation, which can establish another sort of being together, of talking together and thinking about what we are talking. So actually we are not going to do it here. We have this setting, we go with it. Please, Thomas.
Just before Thomas says something, I'm just reminded here, Hannah, of this of the debut that Tino Sehgal had in India, and I was part of that performance in Bombay, and it was very interesting because what the entire performance was about was about essentially this, about using conversation as substance, about creating a diagram out of all the different tracks and trails we leave when we open our mouth and train our voices, and we actually, sort of construct a kind of a diagram between ourselves, between you as a speaker and me as an interlocutor. And I thought that was really fascinating because it actually, it provokes you to understand how a lot of non-object material can have a tremendous amount of value, which we constantly and continuously discount in our lives. Sorry, yeah. Thomas.
I love to hate Tino Sehgal.
I knew it. Okay.
And I also love to hate Marina Abramovic.
No, but I always feel kind of guilty of you know, I mean, when I listen to Kilmanji, it's like saying, you know, how fantastic he's political engaged, no, on a kind of a situation of saying, and maybe because I was grow up, how I would say, you know, I could, you know, I don't know. It's the situation of or you know what I mean. It's like a, you know what I mean. It's like I lacks or I could, you know what I mean. It's like it get more complicated, you know. And maybe, you know, I come up with this idea of the capability maybe to invent what is space, right? Or the space is something which, as she talked, you know, is something which is, you know, maybe let me put it like this. And also, like, try to expand a little bit on to certain dimension, no? It's like I mean, remember, when we have this kind of lasagna space, right? Space do not exist there, right? Until you don't enter with your own body, space, there is no space, because the air pressure, which is in all the cube, it press it. This means when you enter, you form space. And then, you know, when two persons move, this means space is something which is physically do not exist. But then the other thing is, like, I tell maybe a very, very short story. You know, there are people on the planet Earth trying, because it go back to this, where is everybody? People on planet Earth trying to see if there is life somewhere else. And they build a telescope, which come back to this idea of observation, no? Observation. We're turning and generating this, or Edward Hall of proxemia idea of space. And when we build a telescope, which is this dimension, we look and say, oh, there is nobody up there. The next year, we build a bigger telescope. We look again and then say, no, there is nobody again. The next year, the telescope will get bigger. We look and nothing. And then the telescope will keep growing, bigger and bigger and bigger. There is a moment that the telescope is so big that the others see first the telescope that we through the scale see that.
Right.
You know,
Or there is, but there's also another possibility that, you know, you stare with your telescope up there, and then the ship you already brought up there is falling down and destroys the telescope. That's also a possibility right now. It's not such a nice thought, not so poetic.
Maybe some, but you know, somehow I always, let's say, it's like this kind of unconscious process. You know, maybe, you know, I'm trying to build this telescope to try to see or discover some kind of space in between us, which may be intergalactic or so close as Hannah is trying to say. But somehow somebody discovered also before I tried. You know, I managed to kind of get in contact somehow. Hopefully.
You know, I'm just, in fact, sort of taking off from all the three responses, I'm just curious to know about, and it's pretty obvious that the dialogic, you know, the fact that you need to have a constant interactivity as part of, you know, as a built-in, as far as art is concerned, seems to be a very crucial component in you know, your art. I mean, all three of you really. So I'm just wondering about the different kinds of worries, you know, that you might have when you actually, or different kinds of anxieties that you might have when you set out on a project and when you actually translate all the ideas that you have into artworks and then into an exhibition which you mount in a space inside the white cube or outside it. So I'm just curious about how you actually come face to face with it.
I'll pass the question.
Well, quite simple actually. I mean, most of our projects are happening on one long night, you know, between 4 to 8 hours. And then it's really, the important question is if this offer, the manipulation we give to the public is working out. And this you can see how people move through the space. This has to do with concentration inside the space, a way of talking without anxiety, curiosity. I mean, this sounds all now very naive and psychologically built up, but as in performance, you can feel the space. And so for me, that's where I actually get my the reaction, the critique, and all of it from. Then, when I'm invited to a museum, then it's getting tricky. And I try to solve this because we are building up a lot of different types of archives.
Absolutely.
Because we are recording everything, so we have this, I don't know, now 900 half-an-hour talks in an encyclopedic manner in the net. I mean, there everyone can listen to. But we also have different types of archives, which are like sculptures. So that's then nice. If a museum buys this, then it's great. But usually, I try to actually avoid the white cube. I don't know if that is a good answer to anyone, but that's basically what I do. Thomas, help here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was funny. I think so. Asad, he came up today and said, "Oh, I think so. One of your spider escaped the cube today." You know, I was quite anxious somehow. I mean,
Right.
I mean, just for the people who have not seen, but it's just like a simple frame, which have been built by a semi-social spider. This means spider, you can divide it in solitary, semi-social, and social. The social are the one who lives all together, and they are the more successful somehow. But there are very few species. Only 20 out of the 43,000, which I like to kind of think about, you know, social political behavior through the capability of sociability that you have, which somehow in spider it seems to work. But yeah, but I got anxious because we are trying to make this hybrid. You know, there was a semi-social spider. She made a web. Then we put a solitary spider who will try to build a web on top of the pre-existing web, you know, and try to share the space, which usually in nature do not, this forced relationship doesn't happen because somebody will do a web here and the other web. They don't mingle one to each other. For me, it's this kind of, you know, extreme Indian situation to get two.
I'm not sure. It still might be there.
Okay, well, maybe let my anxiety go down.
Right.
But anyway, is
Guys, can we finally have some light? Can we?
on the public?
It's,
All right. You know,
No,
sort of
they don't-
one
they
very
don't-
interesting thing about
who's giving the orders?
one very interesting thing about your practices is that they seem to be on, you know, located at a place which is at the intersection of several disciplines, whether it's photography and anthropology, whether it's, you know, checking out animal behavior and performance art, whether it's, you know, even psychoanalysis and therapy, you know, psychotherapy. So there seems to be there seems to be this constant lending and borrowing of enthusiasms that seem to be happening in the course of your work, and which of course brings us to a very crucial proposition, something that I think Hannah mentioned in the course of her provocative exposition, which is the idea of translation. You know, and all of us know that a lot of substance gets lost, and you know, when the idea gets translated into an object or into a non-object, and I think it's an idea that needs to be looked at very carefully when one is actually looking at an experience without national borders. You know, the idea of what one might call traveling art. What happens when art actually crosses national borders? When artists choose not to sort of bracket themselves within national identities? When art that is produced in a particular place is shown in different centers? What is the cultural baggage that it loses? And what is the heft that it suddenly acquires? Context, of course, is very important, and sometimes one gets to see art without its attendant context. So I'm just wondering about your thoughts about creating new audiences, you know, for contemporary art.
Well, when I create my work, actually, after it's been created, it becomes something independent of that each one gets their own interpretation. And even if sometimes I write some text and about what I do, but I also like to feel that reaction of how people would first confront themselves with the aesthetical part of the work before that getting aware of all concepts going around. But for sure, like for me, it's important. Like from the moment I start like thinking on creating something, I know that this like kind of this global connection that sometimes I'm not really aware.
Sure.
Like this work I present of here of the travesty,
Yes.
yeah, and I would not ever think that someone would be going there and think that it was a woman and do that painting, for example, and so I'm quite open about this, even if even I know that many of those issues I work with, even from this local perspective, they somehow are connected to some global interpretation.
Right. Hannah?
So nothing gets lost in the translation, that I would say is a statement. And actually one of the dialogues, one of the first experience why we also thought about that the dialogue is actually really a good material to explore, that was already in the 90s, and then in Germany we had suddenly a new asylum law. So in Germany you have the right to ask for asylum, but the new law said that you are not allowed to enter Germany through a third country. So for example, when you were a refugee from Yugoslavia, you came to Austria and then you wanted to enter Germany, that was not any longer possible. So what happened in that moment is that, of course, all those people who took on this long journey and sometimes had 4 different countries to travel to Germany, when they came into the country, they met people from the, let's say, migration office. I also have to say that all of these officials were really against this law. So what happened, and in this period I was involved in the politics around this, is that you have suddenly 2 people who come to meet and who have to invent and construct a new story without saying directly that they do this. So the official tried somehow to guide the person who was then, of course, maybe happy to have landed in Germany and would have been really happy even to share their authentic story, how they moved. He tried then somehow to indicate that maybe some parts of the story should be not told and maybe others. So that's for me the translation process which I find interesting, that you, in listening to the other person and trying to come up with a new construct for this specific moment or for the situation or for the identity for a person whatsoever. So I think translation actually with all its misunderstandings could be always used as a tool for a new story actually. So I don't think...
Thomas?
No, no, we just came from Clark House, no? We were before coming up here, and I think so it came up a little bit, no, when we were at Clark House, no? We were watching your work, and also, I mean, very simple, you know, you need a lot of, what was this work with the aspirins, and, you know, you need a lot of kind of background information, which somehow was, I mean, the work became kind of, to a certain extent, at least for me, more rich in the moment when I had access to this information. But nevertheless, I think so, could be also this misinterpretation, which is kind of maybe even more rich. And I think so the artwork, I love it because it gives you both possibilities. But one thing which I will say always, I like this idea of translation, but I think so is, I like more the idea of interpretation. Or, you know, I mean, for example, you know, now many people talk in English, but sometimes it's getting very, very difficult for me to understand somebody talk Indian, English, who is, you know, and then it's like, well, we talk the same language, but how, in the way how we interpret it, it became sometimes hard. Or somebody from Australia talking, I could not understand. This means it seems we talk the same language at some point, but at the same time, you get...
I guess all good things come to an end. But what, sorry?
Yes, let's open
I just thought, do we have the time at all?
5 minutes.
Just one Yeah, just one thing to wrap it up really. The fact that what you said, Thomas, really reminds me of this extraordinary book, this extraordinary essay by Umberto Eco called Misreadings, where he talks about how acts of mistranslation, are really very crucial to the development of civilization. And I think what has really happened here in the course of our conversation is the opening out of a kind of a dialogue between politics and aesthetics, that all of us have been trying to arrive at or have been trying to partake of in our own capacities. And most importantly, to sort of locate our understanding of art in the territory, the shifting, the mobile territory between politics and aesthetics. I think I shall halt my horses there and open the session out to all of you. So I think we have time for only 2 questions. Please introduce yourself and...
Hannah is complaining that she wants more light on the audience, really? If it's possible. Otherwise, she's very strongly. I turn my face to you when I listen.
You actually can't see it because
because it's very strong. Oh, thank you.
There are people.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Tushar Pandey. I am an artist, performer, and a performance artist. I don't really have a question, but I just want to respond to something you were talking about the space and technology. One of the things my piece recently have been working on the idea of how technology and space can come together, and has been via internet. And that really what you've been talking of boundaries and how can one communicate or not even come in contact yet share a space. And about just sharing one of the recent works I've done. It was just performed for one audience member and one artist. Like I was performing with somebody in Sydney. And because we were sharing a small room, nobody else can actually come in or see, we changed the whole dynamics of what space could be like, because all we could see, we had no idea where they come from. All she knew was I am an artist performing from somewhere in the world, because my room can be anywhere in India or in London or anywhere else. And same goes for the same person. All I knew was she was watching my performance in an auditorium or in a gallery in Sydney. Now, it's just a take of actually not coming in a physical contact can yet produce something very different. Not knowing what they come from, the background, yet opened up the idea of the space we shared inside was very different. And it's just a different thought. I mean, I'm just saying it was something I wanted to introduce and ask, how do you want to respond to that? Because there is no baggage of their background, I knew. And yet I felt they opened too much. The space suddenly came together. I mean, just a thought, if you can respond to that.
No, I don't know, but no, but was something also which I think is also Peter, what he was talking, this capability of art to make it more ambiguous. And only can remember now the work we just again saw at the Clark House. You remember this person who was working on the kind of answering, you can help me.
Which one?
I'm with you. A call center, no? That he will be, and this also came much before also internet, and then he will be living here during the evening, answering phone call from somebody else, and I think so that was a beautiful work also. You should go and have a look at it. I don't know, just came up this to my mind.
Well, for me, it's not, I'm not creating spaces to say that knowledge transfer can only happen when you see each other. Obviously, not that. But for me, it's important the part of the observer, and that you observe the observer. This is how I construct my spaces. So therefore, I actually, yes, indeed, I need a specific space and people in there. Because for me, the dialogue is only interesting when it's being observed, right? And so, therefore, I need to see how it is observed. That's basically the dramaturgy of the things I'm doing. Yeah.
We have time for one more question, I guess.
I don't mind if there are no questions. Well,
No?
we are done.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, and thanks for being such a lovely audience.
Good evening, everyone. And firstly, thank you to... No, that doesn't matter. I'm not that photogenic anyway nowadays. Firstly, I'd like to thank Peter Fishley, our keynote lecturer, and I'm glad that we taught him a new phrase, keynote, for a very stimulating start to the evening. And I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of fun with figuring out what I hate to love and what I love to hate. And I can see this has got potential of becoming really quite obsessive. And I'm sure that you'll have a lot of fun with it too. And then, of course, we've been spoilt for riches today with the panel discussion and Kulanji with his commitment to Angola and its development and his futuristic visions, which challenge the normal prejudices that we have of Africa, and Hannah and her exploration of the psyche, including soma, body, and how conversation, even if it's artificially constructed, can reveal aspects of yourself to yourself. And of course, Thomas and his amazing spiders. And I'm sorry that I caused him some anxiety by saying I think that one's escaped, and those sort of beautiful images of his. So I think that we really have had a wonderful evening, and I can see that the food is beckoning, and so I won't go on too long. I'd just like to say that Inlaks provides this award to young graduating artists because we see this as being a critical moment in their career and their development. They're coming straight out of art school, and we want to give them protection, important protection for a year or so, by which they can build up a body of knowledge. As part of the award, there's a residency, a 2-month residency, which is also provided. And we think it's important that they can actually spend that time finding out who they are before they get sucked into the marketplace. The Inlaks Foundation was set up by my late father in the late 70s. He unfortunately passed 2 years after he initiated the foundation, but there were several of us who really responded to his vision and have kept it going since then. So we've been going for about 35 years. His proposition was very simple. He went to Cambridge. It changed his life. He wanted to give other people the same opportunity to go to a leading university, world-class institution outside of India, and to have that experience. And he felt that that would be a seminal experience in their lives. And of course, it's not just limited to the arts and culture, but we cover the whole range of different disciplines. Often I am asked, why does Inlaks support the arts? I mean, like the first scholar that went to the Royal College of Art was back in 1981. That was Rekha Radwitian. She now is in the permanent collection of the National Gallery in Delhi. And since then, most years we've had scholars doing masters at places like the Royal College of Art or Goldsmiths and equivalent institutions in America. And on previous occasions, such as this, I've talked about freedom of expression and how important Inlaks feels that is to Indian society and Indian democracy, and the very special role that the artistic community, and by that I mean also writers and poets and musicians, the very special role the artistic community plays in keeping that vital freedom alive and well. So I'm not going to make those same arguments again. But recently, during some of the debates, the friendly debates that go on, I mean, like even as a board of trustees, quite often there are discussions about allocation of funding, and sometimes people talk about useful subjects and useless subjects. And I know that everyone in this room understands that that's an artificial distinction, and I don't have to actually justify our commitment to culture to this particular audience. But sometimes what I say to my friends and some of the trustees is I think all of us have a duty to think of the sort of India we'd like to be living in as consciously as we can in about 20 years' time. Anybody with any type of influence or affluence ought to actually do that thought exercise. And would you like to be living in an India in 20 years' time where the cultural community is vital and vibrant and constantly risk-taking and challenging the status quo, maybe sometimes in a seductive, subversive sort of manner, Or would you like to live in an India where there's a paucity of diversity of art and culture, where it is a monocentric country, a monocentric culture, tinged with religious chauvinism? And I think both those realities are out there waiting for us, and they're both very real. And I think that what we have to do is to be thinking about that and taking action now so we get to where we want to get to and not some other destination. And I think it's particularly important at this moment when India's undergoing such massive transformation on all levels, on a scale never seen before in its history. And it's not some sort of astrological, psychic, prophecy that India's going to go through this sort of tremendous change, like the Mayan calendar or something. It's just pure demographics. You have 650 million people who are under the age of 25, most of them under the age of 20. They're all going to come of age in the next 20 years. That sector of the population still continues to grow rapidly because the population is growing. That's going to be a huge amount of hormones that's going to be released into the system and will be wafting through the system in the next 20 years. And they're all going to be coming to the peak of their desire, their aspirations, their demands, their desires to consume. And so I think that these choices that we have to make, the sort of India that we would like to be living in, are extremely important. So that question, what type of India, and do you actually want to have a vibrant artistic cultural community pushing the limits, is really Inlaks's answer to why do we do what we do. So thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for being so committed. As I say, I don't have to make those arguments, and please forgive me if I come across as being a little bit patronizing to this particular audience. I mean, I know that you actually understand these arguments probably more profoundly than I do, and I want to apologize also to Peter that I've been rather opinionated in the last 2 minutes, but so sometimes when you get the microphone, you want to put across some opinions. Okay, so thank you very much for being here today, and I think we have to now get on to the main purpose of the event, which is to give the prizes. And I'd like to call on Peter Fishley, please, to come and do us the honor of recognizing this outstanding talent that's here tonight.
Peter, would you like to come up here? Then I can just give you sort of just a very brief bio of each of these artists. I'll start with Amshu MS. Amshu was educated in Hyderabad. Amshu, could we have you come here? Yeah. And at MS University, Baroda. Could we see some of his work? I'll just tell you a brief something about him. He works mainly with videos, along with paintings, installations, and photography, incorporating narrative structures of filmmaking. His major source of inspiration is cinema and the cinematic language. In his working process, he tries to incorporate the characteristics and implications specifically related to the use of either film or video techniques. So, Amshu, that is the first one. Okay. We now have Juhika Devi. Juhika Devi did her bachelor's as well as her master's from MS University, Baroda. Originally from Bastar, Chhattisgarh, she now lives and works in Navsari, Gujarat. Juhika feels that the exposure she has received all these years has strengthened her bond with her native Bastar. Her recent works explore the subject of society, of how society shapes the behavior of people. Juhika. We now have Kaushik Saha. Kaushik comes from Kolkata and did his early art education at Rabindra University, Kolkata, and is now in his final year of his MVA at the MS University in Baroda. Kaushik feels that conventional paintings, are we looking at some of his works? Yeah. Hung on walls communicate to a few people, while hoardings are visible to a great many. He proposes to change the way people look at paintings and make large works that are displayed as hoardings. Kaushik. Mamta. Mamta studied photography and photojournalism at the University of Mysore. After pursuing her interest in bird photography, she did her master's in painting from the same institution. Though only 26 years of age, she has won several awards, both at the national and international levels. Mamta. And Trebor obtained his master's from Kala Bhavna Vishwabharati University, Shanti Niketan. Trebor is experimenting with the narrative comic-like format of text and sequential image in order to extend his practice beyond the gallery space. During his tenure of the Inlaks Award, he will explore the richness of Khasi folk tales and will engage in a kind of interactive visual participation with the oral and written tradition of Khasi folklore. Trebola. Thank you all for your presence this evening and for your continuous support to the foundation. And the bar is now open, and we'll have dinner after that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.